President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the extension of the Voluntary Assets and Income Declaration Scheme to June the 30th, 2018. The short extension after the original March the 31st date is set to be on the appeals by professional bodies and individual taxpayers. The President added that a new date was also given based on the conviction of the Ministry of Finance that the overall objective to increase compliance will be attained and additional revenue be accrued. According to President Buhari, for a nation of people who are competitive and driven, it is not a pride that we are the lowest performer in tax to GDP, not just in Africa, but in the world. The President urged Nigerian companies and individuals to join government in rebuilding mission and do the right thing by taking this window of extension to regularize. He added that the right thing may not be convenient or comfortable, but in the long run, we will all have a nation that we will be proud of. VAIDS is one of the key policies being used by the federal government to reposition the Nigerian economy and correct inherited underdevelopment. The country has one of the lowest tax collection rates in the world at just 6% of the gross domestic product. Well, I have a partner with me here, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Esiri Agbeyi, looking more at the presidential directive. Thank you very much, Esiri.
Thank you.
Esiri, let's start this way. How did you feel when you heard that the deadline has been extended to June the 30th? How did you feel?
So I think there were mixed feelings, actually. On the one hand, I think there's this excitement about the fact that, taxpayers now have a longer time frame to do this. But on the other hand, it's really, since there was so much emphasis on 31st March at the time, and that deadline would not be extended. It was kind of shocking to then see that it was extended again. So I think perhaps the government has gotten feelers about the fact that this is something that the public is embracing, and perhaps is also shoring up more revenues for the government. And to the extent it's having that positive impact, perhaps that's why they've considered extending as well.
I am worried. Why do Nigerians, we always have to wait until the last hour? We have to wait until that point where it gets to like the enforcement. That's when we take actions. Why do we have to wait?
So it's not peculiar to Nigeria that we've waited till that long. I think what has been missing is the steady culture on tax awareness. So that has been lacking for a very long time. But you also have to appreciate that a lot of people have not built that kind of trust for the government, especially in the sense of we don't have the right infrastructure, we're not seeing the right roads, we don't have electricity. So there's really no encouragement to them, or to us as well, to pay those taxes. And so a lot of people have neglected those duties, they've fallen back on those obligations, and really now I think it should be more of awareness to draw more people to the net. And of course, they're using this on the back of a tax amnesty, and so it makes more sense. But then the reason I said it's not peculiar to Nigeria is in other countries or climes, like even Kenya also has instituted a tax amnesty program very recently. Ghana also has taken this on board, especially seeing that Nigeria was doing it. South Africa has done this before. There are other countries that have done this. The first thing, even Angola has done it. The first thing with any public would be really what's government trying to achieve. So there's a sense of fear before you then fully embrace it. At the rush hour, when people then appreciate that this is real, there's that rush. So even in March, we saw that rush as well in the services that we were offering to our clients. So I'm not surprised really with the reaction.
Maybe government at some time have failed Nigerians in implementing what they're supposed to do. When you get tax on people, for example, Lagos State, many will tell you, oh, government body is building this, building that, so I'm happy to pay my tax. When will we get that to that level with this federal government?
So I think the first step really is an indication of a strong will to do so. And I think government has made that very clear. So it would be the aftermath or the post-effect of VAIDS. This is what would really be decisive to say whether or not this would be sustainable. To the extent that government fails on promises to its people, and it's very unlikely that this culture would be sustained in the long term. And so everything or every effort that has been put into establishing VAIDS is one step in the right direction of ensuring that we're putting out there a positive political will. But the next step will be then to act on the funds that you've collected and make sure that people actually see that those funds are being put to good use.
Hey, Siri, let's look at Nigeria's performance now, tax to GDP, 6%. I'm really surprised, talking about lowest, not only in Africa, but in the world.
Yeah.
Why? How did we get to this point?
Again, it's really that we've lost all sense of, commitments to what the rules of the law would say. But it's very sad because just next door, Ghana's tax to GDP ratio is about 16%. South Africa as well measures up to that, or even a little higher, about 27%. With a lot of developed nations, you would find that rate around 32%, so that's double. And Nigeria really is the lowest, which is very sad. But I think it's a lot of where have we gone wrong? We need to ask ourselves that question. Tax is not just for the taxpayer alone. Tax is a social contract that should exist between the taxpayer and the government, or the people acting on our behalf there. And all the institutions need to speak to that contract. To the extent that one of those institutions fails, then it affects the whole cycle. So I think every single place at the federal level, at the state level, even at the local government level, that's where we now need to start correcting processes and making sure that they speak to laws and that the courts that are enforcing, non-compliance to the extent there is. Because if you have a lot of defaulters and there's no one enforcing it, those defaulters will continue to be on the rise. Because the question is very easy. What's in it for me if I comply? When you're not doing anything to the people that are not complying. So that's really, I think, the basic question to address, but it's not just about speaking it, because we've spoken about this for too long. It's really about ensuring that every single person puts hands on deck and that we're moving the country forward in the right direction.
Moving the country forward. VAIDS, one of the key policies that we use by the federal government to activate the economic recovery and growth plan, and particularly to actually address the current inherited underdevelopment. I take that word very importantly. So apart from funds, I think that's just the major way funds will come in from there to the federal government. How else do you see this helping us activate our beautiful economic growth and recovery plan?
So the one thing is we would get the funds, which is fine. But again, like I said before, there's the awareness that this is bringing, and that awareness would also drive a change in culture, hopefully. And maybe just using some examples, one of the reasons why VAIDS really is a commendable effort by government is because for the longest time, our taxes have really come from the formal sector through payee taxes. And that goes to the state level. So in terms of funding at the corporate or the federal level, you have companies as well in the tax net. Outside of those companies who are paying taxes and the employees in those companies, there's actually entrepreneurs, self-employed people who are also generating income and using the same resources that these guys in the formal employment sector use. Everyone must contribute to the same pockets that's driving those resources. To the extent that we don't, then there's going to be that continuous deficit and deficit in infrastructure. But not just that, the increase in interest rates, and that also impacts on the prices of goods in the market. That also leads to inflation. So to the extent that we don't correct this, not only would it not affect us positively in terms of that sustainable culture that would drive growth, but then it would affect our pockets as well. So you would have skyrocketing interest rates, skyrocketing inflation that we can't manage. So it's very important that we do this, and the tax policies must speak to the monetary policies of the country so that we have a brighter economy for us and our children. We
really need that brighter economy. Now, FRS says 20 billion has been raised from 262 taxpayers. That seems to be on the good side, who declare their assets without any. So what do you think will happen to those that don't declare at the end of the day?
My honest truth, or my honest gut, is those people who don't declare need to be called to order. The ones that do come to declare should not be punished, because again, I do this every day for my clients. And one of the big questions is, Siri, if I come forward and I declare, what's going to happen to me? I hope these guys are not going to then witch hunt me. But then again, this is a step, like I said, in the right direction to build trust, and government needs to embrace it fully and make sure that you're not punishing those that come forward, and that those who don't come forward are the ones you should then look towards charging to courts or whatever system or process we have in place to deal with those defaulters.
Okay, in your view, would you want an extension? Many analysts have been having mixed reactions. Some say that's a good one. Some say they shouldn't extend anymore.
They've extended now, but government needs to be firm with this one, because you don't want to go back on then extending again and then reducing the energy that this has already driven. You don't want to douse that energy. So June 2018 should be a firm deadline, and we should work towards ensuring that people really come during this period before it closes. Siri,
I know today we're not talking about inflation, but I just want a word from you. 13.34%. What do you see? What do you think about it?
So I think that's positive news, first of all, because we're about 14-point-something% last month. So going forward, the question is, can we have that continuously go down? What are the factors that we need to consider to make sure that it goes down? A lot of this really looks at consumer behavior. It looks at the prices in markets. So the prices in the markets are driven also by all of these things we've mentioned, like the interest rate. And to the extent we're not shoring up enough revenues as we should, even in Forex, it's going to affect those. So all of these have, you know, they tie. Yeah, and to the extent that we're not addressing those areas from a monetary perspective, then it would continue to dwindle.
Siri Agbeyi, thank you very much, partner of PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thanks for bringing us up to speed with trading area, talking about VAIDS and all of that, issues around the Nigerian economy. Thank you again for joining us on Business Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Hope to have you again soon.
I'll be happy to come back.
All right, then let's see. Maybe when the compliance is 100%.